For most of the 19th century, if you asked an American or a European about Native American societies, you'd likely hear a familiar story. A story of chaos, of constant, brutal violence. The image was one of warrior-led tribes, supposedly incapable of any real order or long-term stability. This wasn't just a casual opinion. It was a deeply ingrained belief, a lens through which an entire continent was viewed. Why was this idea so widespread? Well, it came down to how these colonial observers defined civilization. To them, a civilized society needed a king or a president, a thick book of written laws, and grand stone buildings for its government. They looked at native societies and saw none of that. Instead, they saw leaders who led by influence, not by decree. They saw traditions passed down through stories, not statutes. And they saw a deep connection to the land, not a desire to build permanent, static cities. So, from their perspective, these societies must be primitive and unstable. This narrative was everywhere. You'd hear it from politicians in Washington, arguing for expansionist policies. You'd read it in the reports of army officers stationed on the frontier, who saw every conflict as proof of inherent savagery. Missionaries wrote home about the need to save souls from this chaotic existence, and newspaper editors sold papers with sensationalized stories of warrior brutality. The message was consistent. These tribes were held together only by fear and brute force. Even the new field of anthropology got it wrong. Early anthropologists, studying cultures from a distance, developed theories that warrior-led societies were doomed to self-destruct. They imagined a constant, bloody struggle for power, where ambitious young warriors would inevitably challenge and overthrow their elders, leading to a cycle of collapse. This academic theory lent a veneer of scientific legitimacy to the popular prejudice. Military strategy was built on this misunderstanding. U.S. Army doctrine often treated Plains tribes not as disciplined military forces, but as unpredictable, emotional mobs. They believed that native warriors were driven by impulse and bloodlust, not by strategy or a clear chain of command. This fundamental misreading of their opponents led to countless strategic errors and a tragic underestimation of the resilience and organization of native peoples. This belief system was so powerful because it was so useful. It served a purpose. If native societies were inherently chaotic and violent, then conquest wasn't just an opportunity, it was a moral obligation. It justified breaking treaties, forcibly removing people from their ancestral lands, and imposing a new way of life. It allowed colonizers to see themselves not as invaders, but as saviors, bringing order to a lawless world and progress to a people stuck in the past. It was a comforting story that washed away guilt and bolstered a sense of superiority. The idea felt unbreakable because it was the very foundation of manifest destiny. But this entire towering structure of belief, this unbreakable truth, was built on a lie. It ignored a complex and sophisticated reality that had existed for generations, long before the first soldier raised a flag on the Great Plains. There was a system, an ancient and powerful one, that quietly and completely shattered this colonial myth. A system of governance, diplomacy, and social order that proved warrior societies could be incredibly stable, peaceful, and prosperous. This system was the world of the Great Plains horse cultures. Think of the Lakota, the Cheyenne, the Comanche. When we picture them today, we often see the stereotype, the lone warrior on horseback. But that image misses the genius of their society. The real power wasn't just in the individual warrior. It was in the intricate web of relationships, rules, and responsibilities that bound them together. Their societies were built around warrior sodalities, or societies. These weren't just gangs of fighters. They were more like a combination of a police force, a social club, a mutual aid society, and a school. Each society had its own songs, dances, regalia, and specific duties. Young boys would aspire to join one, and as they grew, they would move through the ranks, learning the responsibilities that came with each level. For example, one society might be in charge of policing the camp, ensuring no one started a buffalo hunt to early and scared off the herds. Another might be responsible for guarding the village while the main hunting party was away. The most prestigious societies were often made up of veteran warriors who acted as an advisory council to the tribe's chiefs. They were the keepers of wisdom, the ones who had seen it all and could guide the people through difficult times. This system created order without a centralized king or dictator. Leadership was earned through bravery, generosity, and wisdom, not inherited or seized by force. A chief couldn't just issue a command. He had to persuade the council and the warrior societies that his plan was the best course of action. Power was distributed, which prevented any one person or group from becoming too dominant. This was a system of checks and balances that would have been familiar to the framers of the US Constitution, had they bothered to look. Far from being a constant free-for-all, violence was highly regulated. The warrior societies enforced rules of engagement. Warfare wasn't just chaotic slaughter. It was often a way to gain prestige, capture horses, or settle disputes with a minimum of bloodshed. The highest honor wasn't necessarily killing an enemy, but demonstrating bravery through acts like counting coup, touching an enemy in battle, and getting away unharmed. This emphasis on skill and courage over sheer killing moderated the lethality of conflict. This system also fostered incredible long-term stability. The Cheyenne, for instance, had a council of 44 peace chiefs, who were required to be men of calm and generous temperament. Their primary job was to maintain peace within the tribe and with their neighbors. They held their office for 10 years, creating continuity and a long-term vision for the people. This was a far cry from the chaotic, impulse-driven world imagined by outsiders. The Lakota Nation was a powerful confederacy of 7 distinct bands, united by language, culture, and a shared political system. They could come together to form a massive fighting force when threatened, but for most of the year, they operated as independent, self-governing units. This flexible, decentralized structure allowed them to control a vast territory for over a century. It wasn't chaos. It was a sophisticated adaptation to life on the plains. So why was this reality invisible to so many? Because they weren't looking for it. They saw warriors and assumed chaos. They saw decentralized power and assumed weakness. They couldn't comprehend a society that valued consensus over command and generosity over accumulation of wealth. They saw a world so different from their own that they could only describe it by what they thought it lacked, not by what it actually possessed. The story of the Plains warrior societies is a powerful reminder that civilization is not a single, narrow path. It's a vast landscape with many different routes. The belief that these cultures were violent and unstable wasn't a reflection of reality. It was a reflection of the fears and ambitions of the people who created the myth. The true story, the one written in the social fabric of the tribes themselves, is one of ingenuity, resilience, and a profound and enduring form of order. Long before it was won, the West was already governed.
Imagine stepping back in time into a world that existed long before railroads sliced through the plains and reservation borders redrew the map. This is the world of the Cheyenne, a vibrant, complex society thriving on the vast American grasslands. Forget the stereotypical images you might have of Native American life. Survival here wasn't just about raw strength or individual prowess. It was about something far more sophisticated: coordination, restraint, and a deep, collective trust that bound the people together. This is the story of that world, seen through the eyes of a young man named Wooden Leg. We first meet Wooden Leg as a boy growing up among the northern Cheyenne in the mid-19th century. His education is a testament to the values of his people. Yes, he is trained to be a warrior, to be brave and skilled in combat. But more importantly, he is raised to obey, to listen carefully to his elders, and to show immense self-control, especially when given an order. This upbringing shapes him into a man who is a world away from the simplistic, aggressive caricature often portrayed in popular culture. Wooden Leg lives within a powerful and rigid moral framework, a code of conduct that guides every aspect of his life and the lives of his people. To truly understand the Cheyenne, you have to grasp the genius of their social structure. Their society was governed by a unique dual system of authority, one that brilliantly separated military action from civil order. This separation was the bedrock of their stability. Think about that for a moment. In a world where conflict was a reality, they made a conscious choice to ensure that the warriors did not hold ultimate power over the daily lives of the people. This was a society without kings, without a single, all-powerful ruler. So, who was in charge? The heart of Cheyenne civil life was the Council of 44. This esteemed group of leaders was responsible for governing everything from daily affairs and administering justice to conducting delicate diplomacy with other tribes and, eventually, with the encroaching Americans. Their guiding principle was calm, careful deliberation. Decisions were not made in haste or anger. The council was the steady hand that guided the nation, ensuring peace and order within the community. They were the peacemakers, the judges, and the diplomats, embodying the wisdom and restraint that the Cheyenne valued so highly. Now, you might be thinking, what about the warriors? The Cheyenne were renowned for their bravery and military skill. Warrior societies, like the famous dog soldiers, were a crucial part of their world. They were the protectors, the ones who defended the people from their enemies. However, their power was strictly defined and limited. These societies operated under a clear set of rules that explicitly forbade them from ruling the people or interfering with the civil authority of the Council of 44. Their role was to serve and protect the nation, not to control it. This check on military power was a cornerstone of Cheyenne democracy and freedom. This system is so remarkable because it worked, and it worked for nearly 2 centuries. Imagine a nation thriving without the institutions we often consider essential for order. No kings, no prisons, and no standing army in the modern sense. Instead, they relied on shared values, mutual respect, and a sophisticated political structure that balanced power and responsibility. Justice wasn't about punishment and incarceration. It was about restoring harmony to the community. Order wasn't maintained by force, but by a collective commitment to a moral code. This was a society built on trust, not fear. It challenges our own assumptions about what it takes to build a stable and just world. We watch Wooden Leg grow from a boy into a young man, internalizing this intricate code of conduct. He learns his place within the community, understanding that his individual actions have consequences for everyone. He witnesses the council's deliberations and respects the authority of the warrior society leaders in their proper context. His identity is forged not just by his personal skills, but by his commitment to the Cheyenne way of life, a life of balance and responsibility. This internal world of order and meaning provides him with a strong foundation as he prepares to face the greatest challenge his people have ever known. But this world of intricate balance could not remain isolated forever. The pressure from American expansion was mounting relentlessly. The world around the Cheyenne was beginning to fracture and collapse. The arrival of settlers, the slaughter of the buffalo herds that were the lifeblood of the Plains tribes, and the aggressive policies of the United States government created a crisis of unprecedented scale. The very fabric of Cheyenne existence was threatened. This is where Wooden Leg's story becomes a powerful and poignant human drama. He and his people are confronted with an impossible challenge. How do you preserve a world built on order, restraint, and internal harmony when faced with overwhelming external chaos and violence? How does a peace chief maintain diplomacy when treaties are constantly broken? How does a warrior society exercise restraint when their families and their way of life are under direct attack? The dual system of governance that had served the Cheyenne so well for generations was now strained to its breaking point. Wooden Leg, a product of this disciplined and orderly world, is forced to navigate this new, terrifying reality. He sees the choices his leaders have to make, choices between resistance and accommodation, between war and a peace that might mean annihilation. He participates in the great battles of the Plains Wars, not as a savage warrior of fiction, but as a man defending his home, his family, and a moral universe that was being systematically dismantled. His personal journey mirrors the tragic story of his people, a story of incredible resilience, dignity, and courage in the face of unimaginable loss. The story of Wooden Leg and the Cheyenne is more than just a history lesson. It's a profound reflection on the nature of society, governance, and human dignity. It reminds us that there have been, and still are, other ways of organizing human life, other models of justice and order. The Cheyenne system, with its separation of powers and its emphasis on collective well-being, offers a timeless and valuable perspective. As we watch Wooden Leg confront the end of his world, we are not just witnessing a historical tragedy. We are being asked to consider what is truly necessary for a society to be free, just, and resilient. His story is a powerful testament to the enduring strength of the human spirit and the communities that nurture it. Thank you for watching. If you found this story meaningful, please like, share, and subscribe for more journeys into the past.
Imagine stepping into a world where power isn't held by one person, but shared among many. A world where the most fearsome warriors bow to the wisdom of their elders, and where a society's survival depends on a strict, unwritten code. This is the world of the Cheyenne people, and we're going to explore it through the eyes of a young man, Wooden Leg. His story isn't just about battles and hunts. It's a living lesson in how a powerful nation maintained its balance and honor. Forget what you think you know about tribal life from old movies. The reality was far more complex and, frankly, more sophisticated. Through Wooden Leg's experiences, we see that the Cheyenne way of life, their code, wasn't something written on a scroll or declared by a king. It was lived every single day, in every decision made, from the smallest personal choice to the largest tribal council. It was woven into the fabric of their existence. Let's start with leadership. In Wooden Leg's world, no single chief could wake up one morning and decide to start a war. The idea of one person ordering a raid without the full agreement of the community was unthinkable. Why? Because unilateral violence was forbidden. It was seen as a threat not just to their enemies, but to the internal harmony of the Cheyenne people themselves. A chief's authority didn't come from his ability to command, but from his ability to listen and build consensus. Power was a responsibility, not a right. To enforce this peace, they had a unique governing body, the Council of 44. These were respected leaders, chosen for their wisdom and integrity. Their primary job wasn't to wage war, but to maintain peace within the tribe. Think about that. Their most powerful council was dedicated to diplomacy and de-escalation. Even if the most famous and powerful warriors were clamoring for a fight, if the council decided against it, their word was final. The collective good, the safety of the entire tribe, always outweighed the desires of any individual or group, no matter how strong they were. Now, you might be thinking, what happens when someone breaks the rules? This is where the code's true strength becomes clear. We see through Wooden Leg's eyes as warriors, men who were revered for their bravery, submit to public punishment without a word of protest, without any resistance. Imagine a celebrated hero being publicly shamed or disciplined and accepting it willingly. This wasn't a sign of weakness, it was the ultimate sign of strength and honor. True honor didn't come from being unbeatable in a fight. It came from obedience to the tribe's laws and respect for the community's decisions. By accepting punishment, a warrior demonstrated that he placed the tribe's well-being above his own pride. This act reinforced the code for everyone watching. This commitment to peace even extended to the structure of their military. The Cheyenne had warrior societies, groups like the Dog Soldiers or the Fox Warriors, known as the Hotomatanio. These were the elite fighting forces of the nation. But here's the crucial part. After a war or a major conflict ended, these powerful societies were required to disband. They would return to being regular members of the community. This was a deliberate, brilliant strategy to prevent the rise of a permanent military class. The Cheyenne understood that a society constantly prepared for war can easily lose its way, becoming dominated by a warrior mindset. By dissolving these groups, they ensured that peace remained the default state of their nation. Warriors were a temporary necessity, not a permanent identity. But this system was not without its challenges. It was constantly being tested. Through Wooden Leg's narrative, we can feel the tension slowly building within the tribe. As raids from enemies increased, as young men saw their friends and family harmed, the hunger for revenge grew stronger. The young warriors, full of fire and grief, felt the pull of immediate, violent retaliation. You can almost hear their arguments, their frustration with the elders' calls for restraint. The code was being strained to its absolute limit, and in these moments of intense pressure, you see the true leadership of the Cheyenne elders. They held the line. They understood the burning anger of the youth, but they also saw the bigger picture. Uncontrolled, retaliatory violence could spiral into a devastating, endless war that could destroy the entire tribe. So they restrained the impulse for revenge, not out of weakness or fear, but out of a deep, profound wisdom. They were protecting the tribe's future, ensuring that generations to come would have a world to inherit. It was a battle of wills, a struggle between the hot-blooded passion of the moment and the long-term vision for survival. Even in the heat of battle, the code held firm. Wooden Leg describes how warriors were bound by strict rules of engagement. They were explicitly forbidden from harming non-combatants, women, children, and the elderly were off limits. This wasn't just a suggestion. It was a sacred rule. A warrior's honor was defined as much by who they didn't harm as by who they defeated. Furthermore, they were required to obey an order to retreat, even if it meant sacrificing personal glory. If a leader called for a withdrawal, every warrior had to follow. Disobeying was a grave offense because it endangered the entire group for the sake of one person's ego. The survival of the brotherhood was paramount. There were moments, harrowing moments, where the entire system seemed on the verge of collapse. The weight of grief and the fire of anger threatened to shatter all discipline. Imagine losing a brother or a best friend in a raid and being told you cannot seek immediate revenge. The emotional pressure must have been immense. We see these moments of near failure, where the temptation to break the code was almost overwhelming. And in these critical moments, we witness the ultimate sacrifice. Leaders, respected chiefs and elders, would sometimes have to sacrifice their own personal honor to prevent the tribe from descending into civil war or self-destructive conflict. A leader might have to make an unpopular decision, appearing weak or cowardly to the young warriors, in order to uphold the greater peace. They would absorb the criticism and the shame, knowing that their personal reputation was less important than the survival and cohesion of their people. This is the opposite of the modern idea of a leader who must always appear strong. For the Cheyenne, true leadership was about putting the tribe first, no matter the personal cost. So, how did this code survive for so long under such intense pressure? Wooden Leg's story gives us the answer, and it's a simple one. The code survived not because it was easy to follow, it was incredibly difficult. It survived because it was enforced without exception for everyone. There were no special privileges for the rich, the powerful, or the famous. A chief's son was held to the same standard as anyone else. A legendary warrior who broke the rules faced the same consequences as a novice. This absolute consistency was the bedrock of their society. It created a system of trust and mutual respect. Everyone knew the rules, and everyone knew they applied to all. This wasn't a code of ideals that were ignored in practice. It was a living, breathing set of principles that guided every action and preserved a nation. The story of Wooden Leg, And the Cheyenne is a powerful reminder that the strength of a community is not in its power to wage war, but in its discipline, its wisdom, and its unwavering commitment to a shared set of values. You step back, almost like you're floating above the timeline, and you see the long-term consequences of this incredible system of governance playing out across generations. It's a revelation. You understand how the Cheyenne Nation managed to avoid internal collapse, staying strong and united long after many of their rival societies fractured and fell apart. It wasn't magic. It was by design. It was the result of a political and social structure so robust, so balanced, that it could withstand pressures that would have shattered other nations. Now, you shift your perspective. You're in the boots of an American officer in the late 19th century, sitting across a fire from a council of Cheyenne leaders. You're frustrated. You're trying to use the tactics that have worked before. Pressure one leader, bribe another, threaten a third, but it's not working. You struggle to comprehend why Cheyenne leadership can't be coerced by targeting individual chiefs. You can't just find the one guy in charge and force his hand, because that's not how their power is structured. The power isn't held by one person. It's distributed, held in trust by the council, and ultimately by the people themselves. It's a decentralized network of authority, and for an outsider accustomed to top-down hierarchies, it's a bewildering and infuriating puzzle. You recognize that this intricate code, this system of checks and balances, forces the United States government to confront a society that's fundamentally different. It's a society that resists domination not through chaos or disorganized resistance, but through its very unity. Their strength isn't in a single warrior or a single chief, but in the unbreakable bonds of their social fabric. The American military machine, designed to find and break a central point of command, finds itself grappling with something more like water. It can't be broken, only contained, and even then, it finds a way to flow. This unique structure completely changes the dynamics of the conflict. You see how this internal balance of power shapes the conflicts that follow. Every negotiation, every battle, every treaty is influenced by this collective decision-making process. The Americans are constantly surprised. They expect a single voice, a single authority to deal with, but instead, they face a chorus of voices, a council that must reach consensus. This makes them unpredictable to their adversaries and incredibly resilient. The Cheyenne can't be easily divided and conquered because their system is built to prevent exactly that. Their political structure is, in itself, a form of defense. But as you trace these grand historical patterns, your focus shifts again, zooming back in from the macro to the micro. You return to the raw human cost. You're reminded that these systems and codes aren't just abstract concepts, they are lived realities. You remember the men and women, individuals with names and families, who had to uphold this code under the most impossible, soul-crushing pressure. Imagine the weight on their shoulders, trying to maintain peace, justice, and unity while their world is being systematically dismantled around them by an overwhelming force. It's a story of incredible moral and physical courage. And then, you learn about a man named Wooden Leg. He's not just a statistic or a footnote in a history book. He's a survivor. He lives through the wars, sees the end of the world he knew, but he doesn't let its memory die with him. In his later years, he sits down and records his memories, his experiences, his understanding of the Cheyenne way of life. He does this so that the system, the code that defined his people, is not forgotten. He ensures that the wisdom of his ancestors and the resilience of his generation are reserved for the future, for us. At this point, you understand why this story truly matters. It's not just a fascinating piece of history. It directly challenges one of the most pervasive and damaging myths of our modern world, the idea that order requires domination, the belief that for a society to be stable, someone must be in charge, and someone must be controlled. The Cheyenne prove this wrong. They show us a different model, a model where order comes from balance, where strength comes from consensus, and where leadership is about service, not power. Their story is a powerful testament to the idea that a just and resilient society can be built on principles of mutual respect and collective responsibility. And then, a feeling settles over you. It's not a burden, but a sense of purpose. You feel a responsibility settle on your shoulders, because now you are the listener. You are the one who has received this story. You now carry this knowledge forward. Wooden leg passed it on, and now it has been passed to you. The chain of memory remains unbroken, but only if you choose to be a link. The survival of this history naturally depends on you. If this story moved you, if you feel that sense of responsibility and wonder, please click the like button. It's a small action, but it tells the algorithm that this history is important and helps us keep it alive for more people to discover. We are deeply committed to rescuing these forgotten stories from the dusty archives of history, and we invite you to subscribe and join our community of history lovers. We'd love to hear from you with the comments. Tell us where you're watching from today. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. And if you have someone in your family who has served in any capacity, we'd be honored if you shared that with us. Thank you for watching, and thank you for ensuring that Wooden Leg and the generations of Cheyenne who lived by this remarkable code are remembered, because history isn't just something that happened in the past. It only survives when we, the living, choose to remember it.